Hey there, welcome back. Over the last 7 weeks, we've looked at the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And if you're anything like me, a few of them were a little less than overwhelming. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks is take those wonders that I think were less than overwhelming and replace them with wonders I think are more deserving of the title. Before we start though, we need to lay a few ground rules down. We need to first identify what wonders need to be replaced. And the nominees are the statue of Zeus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Hanging Gardens of Babel. The second rule is probably the more important rule, and that's what time period are we going to look at. As you know, the Pyramid of Giza is still standing to this day, so I could technically pick something still standing right now, but I'm not going to. It has to be contemporary with the other wonders. So we're going to aim for a time period around 225 BCE. Why 225 BCE? Well, that's the time period that Philo of Byzantium wrote his list of must-sees for Hellenistic travelers. The Hellenistic time period was around 323 BCE to 31 BCE. So we defined what wonders we're going to look at and what time period we're going to look at. Now we need to define where they could be located. They could be located anywhere in the Old World. Trade routes stretched all across the Old World, so it wouldn't be impossible for somebody to have traveled and seen these wonders. Now that we've laid the ground rules out, let's replace the statue of Zeus. If you remember correctly, I don't think the statue of Zeus was all that deserving of the title wonder. And today's substitute wonder actually has something in common with the statue of Zeus. They were both dismantled and moved. But one of them was a much grander undertaking than the other. With that being said, we're going to head back to the time period of Ramses II between 1279 to 1213 BCE, and we're going to be looking at the temple of Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel is located in southern Egypt in a place called Aswan. The temples were constructed sometime between 1264 to 1244 BCE, or even quite possibly 1244 to 1224 BCE. We're not really quite certain. This is all down to modern scholars debating on when Ramses II actually lived. The temples were built in part to celebrate Ramses' victory against the Hittites in 1274 BCE. Ramses was only in the 5th year of his reign when he led his troops to Syria to take on the city of Kadesh. Kadesh was under the control of the Hittite king Muwatalli II, and he had been leading incursions into Egypt's land. The Hittites started to grow in power around the 2nd millennium BCE. They then started to test the boundaries with Egypt, and Akhenaten failed to pay any attention to their power. So by the time that Tutankhamun came to power, the Hittites were a force to be reckoned with. During the rule of Horemheb in 1320 BCE, he took a more aggressive stance against the Hittites and actually managed to secure the border. This didn't stop the Hittites from testing the border, however, so it left it to Ramses II to solve the problem. To solve the problem, Ramses II marched 20,000 troops to Kadesh. On the way, he captured 2 Bedouins and had them interrogated about the Hittites. There was only one problem with this. The Bedouins were actually spies placed by the Hittites to feed the Egyptians false information. The 2 Bedouin told Ramses that Muwatalli feared the might of the Egyptian army, and that the Hittite troops were nowhere near Kadesh. This was all a lie, and the Hittites had already fortified Kadesh. They had 3,500 chariots and 37,000 troops stationed just over the next hill. In Ramses' arrogance and zeal, he took the division that he was in charge of, and he sped ahead of the other 2 divisions, leading to him almost getting cut off from them. Luckily for Ramses, help managed to arrive just in time. He pushed the Hittite troops back into the Orontes River, many of them drowning. The problem is, Ramses yet again had himself cut off from his army. All Muwatalli had to do was march his troops from the city, and he could cut Ramses off. But for some reason we will never know, Muwatalli chose not to march his troops from the city, instead just sitting tight. Now you would imagine in this absolute comedy of errors that both sides would just go home, lick their wounds, and come back and try again. But no. Each side declared a victory. The Egyptians declared victory because they managed to decimate the Hittite army, and the Hittite army claimed victory because they managed to keep control of the city. But in 1258, the Egyptians and the Hittites signed what is considered the world's first peace treaty, and this brought a new era of peace and prosperity to both empires. The 2 empires started to trade information and experience between each other. They remained friends for the next 58 years when the Hittite Empire fell to the Sea People. Now that we got the backstory done, let's find out why our substitute wonder of Abu Simbel deserves to replace the statue of Zeus. For starters, it's 2 temples, but much like other wonders that we've seen, we're going to have to choose one of them over the other. So we're going to take and choose what's called the Great Temple. The Great Temple was carved into a solid sandstone cliffside. It stands at a height of 30 meters and it's 35 meters long. And because narcissists are going to narcissist, each of the 4 seated figures outside of the temple are depictions of Ramses II. Each seated statue of Ramses is 20 meters in height, and as if 20-meter high statues of yourself isn't enough, beneath the statues, there are even more statues of Ramses. And these depict him defeating his enemies, the Nubians, the Libyans, and even the Hittites. And there's also other statues of various gods and other symbols of power, but this was mainly for him. When you enter into the temple, which, remind you, was carved into solid sandstone, you're greeted by depictions of Ramses' victory against the Hittites. Pretty much every wonder we looked at has either been destroyed by humans or was destroyed by natural disasters. Abu Simbel almost suffered the same fate. In the 1960s, the Egyptian government decided they wanted to build the Aswan High Dam, and this would have flooded the temples. To prevent this from happening, UNESCO took the enormous task of dismantling the temple and moving it. They began the project of moving the temples in 1964 and completed it in 1968. They created a man-made cliffside for the new location of the temples. They relocated the temples 65 meters above to a plateau and 210 meters to the northwest of their original location. They cut the temples into blocks, making sure that the cuts were done in areas that when it was reassembled, you wouldn't even be able to tell it was done. Even though UNESCO was able to save Abu Simbel and several other structures, much more was lost when the dam waters came in. In my opinion, Abu Simbel was much more important than the statue of Zeus. For one, the statue of Zeus was just wood, ivory, and gold. There's nothing really important about it. Abu Simbel was massive compared. Even though Abu Simbel was eventually lost to time and then rediscovered, it still held an important place in ancient Egypt, and thus, in my opinion, would have held an important place for just anybody that wanted to take and see something so spectacular. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank the patrons. With their support, I'm able to make these videos happen. If you have any suggestions or wonders that you want to see substituted, let me know.